One of the things that I learned really early on when talking about sales, I've always encountered people whose title is, VP of Sales and Marketing. And nobody really understands what sales and what marketing is. And over the years, every time I've interviewed people to work with me, I've asked one question. In 20 words or less, define for me the difference between sales and marketing. And nobody's ever nailed it. And it's very, very simple. Sales is getting product to the consumer. Marketing is getting the consumer to the product. It's simple, and it's become a mantra because it's really that simple. And people tend to make it complicated. It isn't complicated.
What marketing philosophers would tell an artist to do first is to identify their fan base, their target market first. Because if you have a handle on that, then the promotion aspects of it and the distribution aspects of it become much easier and more targeted. So, for example, if you have an audience that you think is 18 to 24-year-old disgruntled males, who live in suburbia America, and they're very internet tech savvy, then you go about marketing to those people much differently than you would a 45-year-old, empty nester who is fairly wealthy, has a lot of discretionary income, and is not very tech savvy. So if you start off, and the first thing you deal with is who is your fan? Who is the audience? Who is it that you're trying to attract that should like your music and want to listen to your music and appreciate your music? If you start from that position, the rest of the decisions become much, much easier. And especially today, if you have a very tech savvy fan base, you can use the internet to get your music into the hands of a lot of people, and you can participate, have your fans participating in blogs and various websites, to promote your music, through sort of what they call under the radar marketing these days. Where it's like you're marketing it, but nobody really knows you're marketing it. They don't know that those are your fans that are pushing you on a blog or whatever. So those things have become more available to you. Simultaneously, if I'm trying to reach a 45-year-old person who's not tech savvy, then I have a different challenge on my hands. I've got to be able to reach those people through something else. So in the marketing scheme of things, you start with the target market first, and that, to a certain extent, dictates how you're going to get to those people, how you're going to distribute it, how you're going to go about making those other important decisions.
Yeah, I think the standard approach is always going to be, first identify the product, right? So what is your product? Are you selling recorded music? Are you selling live performance? Are you selling some lifestyle imbued quality with your music? Once you've decided what the product actually is, you then need to sort of identify what its special qualities are. What is it that's special about it? Does it capture mood especially well? Does it capture the intensity of the live performance especially well? Does it capture emotion especially well? What is it you get from this product if it's, for instance, recorded music? And then you can even more granularly decide what else it is. Is it rock? If it's rock, is it indie rock? Is it, is it singer-songwriter based rock and roll? What you get into genre, subgenre, those things are good too, because what they do is they exclude people. They act as excluders, and you want to exclude people. You want to be able to say, this is not for everybody. And if it's not for everybody, then who is it for? And so excluders are great. And every time you exclude a piece of the population, you're doing yourself a huge favor. So once you've understood what it is in terms of its value proposition, in terms of its genre and its subgenre, then you can start to identify your market and understand who your listener is. People who like rock, duh, right? That's the simplest way of putting it. Then people who identify with intense emotional experiences in music, or people who want, you know, quirky singer-songwriter material. You can begin to back into an understanding of the lifestyle habits, attitudes of those people. Are these people who love listening to their local NPR station? Are they Fresh Air listeners? Are they Morning Edition listeners? You know, are they people who eat breakfast at the funky breakfast place downtown? You know, are they, you know, where are these people? Who are these people? Get an idea of who they are, usually by getting an idea of who you are, right? The audience often reflects who the individuals on stage. Put yourself at a Jimmy Buffett concert, right? You're at a Jimmy Buffett show, you look out at the audience and you're basically seeing the same dudes on stage in the audience. Go to a Nine Inch Nails gig, people on stage look an awful lot like people in the audience, right? So, you know, so you've done this thing where you've understood the product and you've understood the audience or the consumer, your customer. If you don't see meaning in your music, if there isn't substance, then we don't need it. If it's just style, I suppose there's some value in it for somebody, but it's going to have a hard time cutting through the noise, and right now there's just an awful lot of noise. I think it's important that you also keep in mind that your competition isn't other music, and your competition isn't other media, and your competition isn't people's work. Your competition is free time, people's ability to do anything else with their free time. If someone's giving you their attention, they're not doing their laundry, they're not catching up on their email, they're not vacuuming, they're not doing something else they need to do. So you need to merit being the top choice for that moment in their lives, especially in an instance where music is as portable as it is and as available on demand as it is. And people could listen anytime, which means they can also not listen anytime. It means they're in a setting or in a context where they could choose to vacuum the house or scrub the bathroom or whatever else they might need to do.
That's a tall order.
It can be a tall order, and yet if what you offer is meaning, and what you bring is some resonance that offers healing or companionship or good times or some sympathetic response. You know, people listen to sad music when they're sad. Why? Because it makes them feel better. Well, why does listening to sad music when you're sad make you feel better? It doesn't make any sense. Why isn't that just piling on? Well, it's because there's a sympathetic resonance. We need to feel something that can make us feel not alone. And that kind of meaning, that kind of human connection that comes from creating meaning is what you need to find in your music in order to bring about a compelling offering, something that's worth paying attention to. Because people don't only pay with money, they pay attention, right? We talk a lot about the fact that just listening is a form of payment. Well, you've got that first circle, that circle of friends and family, the people who know about you firsthand. They didn't learn about you through discovery, through independent discovery, or because one of your fans turned them on to you. You've got that first circle, and that's the one that you can get a lot of information out of that circle. You can determine who your fans really are, but not quite as well as you can when you score that second circle. When you start to move into that second circle of people, the circle that were turned onto your music by other fans and who connected and brought something of themselves to it. I mean, keep in mind that there's so much the listener brings to the music. The listener has to do their part. Music requires so much work on the part of the listener. They need to bring themselves to the party. They need to bring themselves to the experience, or it's not done. The music's not done. And when that second circle of people starts to find, start to find their way to the music, you're then at a point where you're really learning something about the kind of people who gain something from your music, who gain some kind of satisfaction or some measure of comfort or something from their experience of listening to your music. And you can observe that cohort of people and get some pretty darn good information about your natural customers. I think it's very important to give your first circle a way of sharing your music with the second circle, a second circle. So what do we do today? Well, you know, we have the Bandcamp page or the Facebook music page or Reverb Nation or whatever, something that allows people to share your music with one another, you know, without physically emailing themselves, you know, emailing each other MP3s or something, right? Send links to one another, embed players. You upload stuff to YouTube, and people share your links with each other on YouTube. You know, they tweet a link, or and you begin to sort of leak out into a world of people who aren't your people. The only thing that you really want to remember when it comes to the money you spend on marketing is that you want to have a reasonable expectation that you're going to get back more than you spent. So it's at that point it comes down to measurement and projection. You know, you want to do real pragmatic, you know, hopefully realistic case projections of what you're going to sell no matter what you'll sell with some decent marketing results, and what you'll sell with ideal, you know, marketing efforts, or ideal marketing success, let's say. And if you can come up with that sort of realistic projection, then you can understand what you have to spend. A lot of artists find it difficult to involve their fans in their marketing because they feel like it's on them to be cool. But there are plenty of ways of involving your fans in your marketing that are genuine, authentic, low pressure, especially in the age of social media. So when you have an intimate interaction or a valuable interaction with a fan, an audience member, let's say, a customer, you have the great ability to amplify that interaction. That very intimate interaction can be amplified through the simple action of a retweet or by having the exchange in public. So much so much information is gained about your values when people see you interacting with a fan, see you interacting with a customer, and understand more about how you really deal with people. That they begin to sort of feel like a stakeholder in your art and in your enterprise. They start to build identification and bond with you. So much of this is like romance. You don't have permission to walk into a bar and walk up to somebody and say, "Will you marry me?" You know, you don't have anywhere near that kind of permission. You have nowhere near the kind of permission that it takes to say, "Buy my new record. I have a new record." You don't have that permission. It takes a long time to get enough implied or explicit permission to speak to someone, to hold their hand, to maybe hope for a peck on the cheek. You know, you don't just get that. Time has to go by. You have to put in the work. You have to prove yourself trustworthy and clean. And the same same for the artist. It's, you know, spamming me with, "I got a new CD, buy it." It's like, who the hell are you? What are you doing? That's not okay. You got to put in the time. You got to make me understand who you are. Make me like you. Make me like your music. Then maybe if I know that it's available to be bought, I'll buy it. But you got to put in the time. You got to romance me.
It seems like that would also show you how to use the tools, how to use Twitter, how to use Facebook, how to use YouTube. Is that how you think of it?
Well, necessity is very definitely the mother of invention. When you need to reach people and you need them to understand your value proposition, you know, you're going to look for every tool in the box. And you know, if you're really thinking hard about this stuff, then you're going to understand, you know, not every technology is going to resonate with everybody. right? So maybe you're not a Twitter person. Okay, cool, but then maybe you are a Facebook person, and you're going to have to see how you can leverage Facebook to be good for you. But so much of it is just being a graceful and decent person. So much of it is just understanding how people should treat people. Understanding basic kindness, basic gratitude, basic generosity. It doesn't matter which of the technologies you use, whether you use them all, whether you spread yourself too thin, not a great idea, whether you focus on one thing, also not a great idea. You know, you want to use a little bit of the things that feel good to you, but no matter what you use, it's just got to be from a place of kindness, grace, decency, generosity, authenticity. If you're not a real person, it just won't matter. And to back it all up, first you have to be making something great. Because if you're not making music that's worth hearing, then everything else just falls apart.
I would like the music to be significant. I would like the artist to have a, some kind of a context. Where do you fit in the universe of, not a genre-specific thing, but who, if I can relate to so-and-so, can I relate to you? You know, it gives people a point of reference, and that's helpful. Some shy away from that. They don't want to be pegged as, a certain genre of music. I deal with an artist who said, here, I don't want you to call me a blues-related artist. I don't want you to call me a singer-songwriter. Well, the music is blues-tinged, and he does write all the songs and sing them. So you could say that. And I understand what he's saying. If you say singer-songwriter, you get a picture of Jackson Browne in your head. And if you say blues, you get a picture of, a guy with a floppy hat and a feather in it playing 12-bar blues. So I understand he didn't want to be pigeonholed. So I just, in the promotional piece I wrote about him, I just said, Ron Franklin says, don't call me blues, and, I don't want to be called a singer-songwriter. Ron, who are we to argue with your wisdom? By saying that, I said it without saying it. I unsaid it. We used this years ago with at Warner Brothers with when the Talking Heads and the Dead Boys and the Ramones came out. We had a campaign that said, don't call it punk. I guess it was by saying, don't call it punk, we kind of called it punk. Mm-hmm. You can call it whatever you want, but, you need some kind of touchstone. You got to have a shortcut for people to have just some idea how they can relate to it, on what basis they can relate to it.
Street Team is, of course, a volunteer base. Hopefully your most passionate fans who are really going to go the extra mile to help you out. Things like putting posters up in record stores, spreading a widget online, all those things are, as simple as just telling their friends. That's a street team, and these days it's obviously more important than ever to have those people on your side. Every day as the industry shrinks, you've got to have your own marketing people in place, and a street rep program, a street team, whatever you want to call it, is just becoming more and more important every day. Put it this way, if you see an advertisement for a movie on TV, it's like, oh, it kind of looks cool, but if I'm your friend and I tell you, I just saw that movie, it's great, go check it out, what's more likely to get you into the theater? The days of huge advances for bands are over. They really are, so it's going to be all about your touring base, your merch base, really building those up, and something like a street team is only going to really make those things excel. You got to get those people out promoting your gigs, promoting your merch, all that type of stuff. I think you definitely got to be passionate about it, and just accept the fact that you're going to put in a lot of sweat equity. You're going to put in a ton of after hours to make it happen, because until you get to the point where your revenue stream is up there enough to where you can quit your day job, you're going to be working 2 jobs. So you're going to be putting in a ton amount of time to get things off the ground until you get your revenue up enough to where you can either go full-time yourself or hire some employees to get the revenue up. So just be ready to work a lot.
With the ability to digitize content, right, be it books or movies or music, you can, it changes the whole concept of inventory. It changes the whole concept of selling. There's a business kind of rule called the 80-20 rule, in which 80% of all of your sales comes from 20% of your inventory. So if you have 10 records in your catalog, you're a record label, and you got 10 records, the rule states that 80% of your profit will come from only 2 of those 10 records, right? So you've got these big hits that sustain everything else. And it's really, really true in the record industry. If you think about the major labels, they'll put out 100 records a year, and 20 of them, if they're lucky, will do something, and the other 80 won't. So that's true across industries. But what Anderson says is that if we can now take everything that we have and get rid of the issues with inventory, we don't have to have warehouses full of CDs. We need to make everything available because we can't really ascertain what the public is going to want. And he uses the example of, there's a book called Into Thin Air by John Krakauer that became this just huge bestseller about mountain climbing. And so it became, #1 on Amazon. And Amazon has a little preference engine. If you like Into Thin Air, you might also like, or customers also buy. And there was this book that had come out several years prior to Into Thin Air called Touching the Void, also about mountain climbing. And it had a couple hundred, maybe 1,000 copies sold. It was largely forgotten. Into Thin Air comes out several years later, becomes this complete sensation. People want more mountain climbing stuff. And there's a little Amazon link saying you might like Touching the Void, and it explodes. And all of a sudden this book that was all but deleted becomes a bestseller. They make a movie out of it and everything else. He uses another example of how Netflix, who in essence, at least they call it Netflix and not Mailflix for a reason. They're trying to digitize all of this stuff, and they will. But right now their strategy is just, we have the widest selection. Whatever you want, we have. So they said, well, we gotta introduce some Bollywood titles, the movies that are made in India, the kind of, those very interesting low-budget movies that they churn out over there. And they didn't have huge expectations for this, and they started renting 100,000 Bollywood titles a month. There isn't a marketing person in the world that would have sat around and said, well, you know what, I think we better put some Bollywood titles out there. But by virtue of the fact that it really didn't cost Netflix anything to do this, they could digitize this. It didn't cost Amazon anything to put Touching the Void up there. You create this long tail, and the metaphor is that you have the heads up here, the big hits, but more and more the tail goes out and extends to eternity because all the products become available. And the message for this, for labels, for musicians, is you have to make your stuff available because you don't know what's going to connect to it. You don't know what blog that's talking about something is going to reference something else. And we see this more and more. Pitchfork Media goes out and they talk about the Arcade Fire, or they talk about Tapes and Tapes or something. Was it Clap Your Hands, Say Yeah. This band from, I think, Philadelphia, no record deal. Playing locally in Philadelphia. They send themselves off a CD to Pitchfork Media. Pitchfork gives it a 10 or something. Bloggers pick up on it. They have since sold 100,000 records without a label, right? This is the idea of the long tail, in the sense that we live in this time in which the information can be connected so quickly. Somebody blogs about something, it gets picked up, and it rises up. So it's imperative that you make your music available. And this, for artists, for musicians, you need to be thinking about not just the records that you craft and you go into studio to do, but what about those live shows? Are you recording your live shows? What about podcasts? What about your guitar player's solo project? All of these things, when you can digitize them and then therefore reduce the carrying cost, you don't have inventory, make them available. You don't know what's gonna poke up.